All right, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Basically, my presentation is on WordPress accessibility from a front-end perspective. So we're talking strictly about WordPress websites and WordPress themes, not specifically core. And we're not really going to get into much into any code specifically, but this is going to be a very generalized outline of what accessibility is, why it's important, how it all works, so WCAG 2.0 compliancy, as well as some various tools that we can use to evaluate websites for accessibility, as well as WordPress plugins that can be used to provide more accessibility options for various themes and various websites. So who am I? I'm Jordan Patel, and I love WordPress, as it says right there. I've been developing websites with it for over 7 years now. I own and operate a company called the Genius Web Media. We specialize in web development based out of Toronto. We do a lot of WordPress work. We specialize in theme and plugin development, as well as website development, all WordPress based. In 2012, we also launched a secondary company called Agent Accelerate, and that specifically is a product-based company where we sell Creo, DDF, and WordPress plugins. So it's all real estate based. So we can build fully custom real estate plugins, pulling in data strictly from the Canadian Real Estate Association, which is pretty cool. Alternatively, I'm also on the organizing committee for the WordPress Toronto user group. Recently a contributor to the WordPress accessibility group. We did some testing, keyboard accessibility testing for 3.8 a couple of weeks back, and we tested it again for keyboard navigability, which was pretty cool. Right now they're doing some testing on 3.9, and they're using specifically 3.9 for the authorship tool component of it, so actually building and processing information as an authoring tool. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now with WordPress core pertaining to accessibility. They're making a lot of strides to ensure that WordPress as a tool itself is accessible for people to be able to create and contribute and interact with the web. So it's pretty exciting stuff. You can find us at thegenius.ca, or if you're on Twitter, at GeniusWebMedia. You can find all of our tweets and everything that we do and what we've done. So what is web accessibility? According to the W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium Web Accessibility Initiative, web accessibility means that people with disabilities can use the web. More specifically, web accessibility means that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the web, and that they can contribute to the web. So it's not only allowing people to be able to work with certain sites, but it's also making sure that people understand what's going on, as well as being able to contribute to the web. Just got a few people coming in. Just give them a moment. And that's some powerful stuff. It's not only saying that they want people to be able to use the web, but they want people with disabilities to be able to contribute, which I think is a fantastic angle towards accessibility in general. According to Wikipedia's web accessibility page, web accessibility refers to the inclusive practice of removing barriers that present access to websites by people with disabilities. So it's breaking those barriers. It's making sure that no matter who you are or where you are, if you've got a computer and you've got internet connection, the web should be an accessible place for everyone to kind of go in and contribute and use. When sites are correctly designed, developed, and edited, all users have equal access to information and functionality. So it's all about equality, right, at the end of the day. The needs that web accessibility aims to address include, so these are kind of the main factors or the kind of categorizations of different types of people or challenges that are most common right now, and that's what web accessibility aims to address, these specific things. So visual impairments, obviously making sure that people with sight challenges or color challenges are able to understand and use websites. Mobility, so people that have limited mobility that use assistive technologies it's important that websites can not only be compatible with those technologies, but that these people have as equal opportunity to interact with these sites as anyone else. Auditory, so obviously people that have challenges hearing, seizures, so people that are sensitive to bright lights or a lot of moving objects. Those have to be considered when designing and developing, as well as cognitive and intellectual. So the people that have intellectual challenges or whatnot fall into the same category for web accessibility in terms of ensuring that websites are in fact accessible for those users. So that's in a nutshell what accessibility is from a broader sense, kind of what it's about. So why is web accessibility so important? Here are a couple of stats that you may be interested in. So over 1 billion people in the world are disabled, according to the World Health Organization. Right? So that's a lot of people. In Canada, the disability rate is roughly 14.3, meaning that over 4.4 million Canadians have a disability. So that's 4.4 million potential viewers or potential audience to your site that you may or may not be capturing depending on how well your website is accessible. In Ontario today, 15.5% of Ontarian population have disabilities. Right? So it's safe to say that it's a significant number of people that have challenges out there. And it's safe to say that web accessibility is definitely important in addressing these things. So that that 15 to 20% have this equal opportunity to interact and contribute with the web as anyone else.
Jordan, some of the sessions got a little late. You want this? Yeah, people are going to wander in this. You're on time. Everyone else.
He's right.
For those of you who got here, I'm Jordan Quintel, and this is a presentation on web accessibility for the disabled or for challenged in any way. So just to catch up, I did explain briefly what web accessibility is, and essentially it's defined as being able to allow people with challenges to perceive, understand, navigate, operate, and contribute to the web. Now I'm going over why web accessibility is important. Why does this matter? Why even talk about web accessibility? And so going over the stats, there's a significant number of people that definitely have challenges, all of which should be addressed on the web. Even though the physical world will always have barriers, I'm a firm believer that the web can be a barrier-free place where anyone of any intellect or any challenge can go on there and can interact with the web and contribute to it just as well as anyone else out there. So lucky for us, the provincial government has been making extended efforts to make Ontario a more disability-friendly place for individuals and businesses alike. So for those of you who are not familiar, there was the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act, AODA, in 2005, which actually became a law June 13, 2005. Under this landmark legislation, the Government of Ontario will develop mandatory accessibility standards. So they've understood that the population is significant enough that there needs to be a standardized process where businesses and individuals that require accessibility can fall under these guidelines and that everything can be kind of streamlined. So the AODA put together this standard to identify and remove and prevent these barriers. So not only do they want to find them, they want to remove them, and they want to prevent them from happening in the future, which is huge. So, the Ontario government is recognizing that these are important and that the people with challenges deserve as much freedom on and offline as anyone else. So the AODA came out with 5 specific standards. The one that's most applicable here is the Accessible Information and Communication Standard, which basically identifies that the removal of barriers in accessing information. The standards could include information being provided in person, through print, a website, or other means. So it's basically saying any tool used for communication now has to be accessible for those that either have sight challenges, motor challenges, whatever the case may be. So no matter what piece of material is being produced, whether it be on print or whether it be on the web, the importance of accessibility is there, and the Ontario government has recognized that. Along with that particular standard, the Ontario government made it obligated organizations to actually update and change all of their communication and information so that it falls under AODA standards. So in 2012, all the government of Ontario and Legislative Assembly had to convert all their sites and all their materials. You'll see the list there. Every year, a different level of organization, whether it be public or private, is now obligated to convert all of their content to web-friendly, web accessible, and in general, accessible friendly materials. So you'll find, and for any of the developers in the room, that's very important. Those developers out there that understand how to make their sites more web accessible will find that that particular skill is going to become extremely important moving down the line. As the large companies are understanding that web accessibility is becoming a mandate in Ontario, they're going to be seeking out developers that can actually do this stuff. It's going to become hugely important, even if you're developing sites from scratch or with WordPress. The fact that that even in Ontario this has started, but could potentially cascade across Canada, and you'll find these standards that are going to become very cascading across different provinces of Canada, and so this stuff is going to become very important for developers in general, which is why it's so important. So basically, with the W3C Web Accessibility Initiative, or W3C WAI, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG 2.0, come into effect. So these are essentially the principles that kind of govern what web accessibility is in a generalized sense. So covering these 4 principles will definitely improve the accessibility of your site, improve it overall. Actually, going back to why it's important, there's what's called the curb cut phenomenon. Is anyone familiar with the curb cuts? On the sidewalks, how they dip at certain points? That was actually built for people with wheelchairs. It was a wheelchair accessible standard that they put in place. And now people are finding that the general public is actually benefiting from it. Anyone that has a shopping cart, anyone that's got a stroller, any elderly person, anyone that just doesn't feel like lifting their foot a couple of inches off the ground have praised the curb cut. And that phenomenon basically suggests that implementing these particular web accessibility standards and trends is not only going to help people that actually need it, it's going to help everyone. People will just find the web and websites that much easier to interact with and use simply by understanding these principles and by integrating them and implementing them. We can inevitably create that curb cut phenomenon across the internet and across the web. It's kind of exciting, it's an exciting phenomenon to think that, if people are thinking in that direction, it's not only going to benefit a small group, but it's going to benefit the large population as well. So keep that in mind, that those types of things happen all the time, and thinking accessibility is not just for a limited amount of people, it's for everybody. So these are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0. Now, WCAG 2.0 falls under 3 compliances. I didn't list them specifically, but for your own information, there's A, AA compliancy, and AAA compliancy, all of which have different standards and different mandates that are required in order to meet said compliancy. These principles cover all compliancy levels. The compliancy levels are more technical in terms of how you can follow those compliances. AAA is basically just like a really dumbed down like HTML site. It's very bare bones. It's just basically there for function value. The single A and double A are probably the most common, what you're going to see out there. A lot of companies are now shooting for AA compliancy. So it's definitely worth taking a look at how you can actually make your sites compliant, because that's what people are going to be looking for, is this type of compliancy. So essentially, the first principle is perceivability. So information and user interface components must be presentable to users in ways they can perceive. So it's not necessarily talking about the information, but it's talking about the actual components of a website. Understanding what an image is, what text is, what a form field is. Think about it as trying to describe a website to somebody that can't see. How would you explain to them what an image is? How would you explain to them what a form field is without using visuals? If you can achieve that, then perceivability is, you can pretty much cover that general principle overall. You just think about it kind of outside the box, not what you see, but what you understand. Operability, so obviously being able to operate the site is very important. No matter what device or no matter what method, whether you use a mouse, whether you use a keyboard, whether you use a joystick, or whether you use any type of technology, the website should be programmed in a way that anyone can operate it using any particular method or any particular technology. So there's a lot of different assistive tools out there for people with mobility issues, people with hearing or sight issues. There's softwares, there's tools that they use, and it's important that websites are built in a way that make that they all kind of work together. So the third principle is understandability, and that's kind of going beyond the first principle, which is understanding what you're looking at. Obviously, you need to be able to know the information that's actually on the site. It's not only what components are on the site, but what those components actually say or do. So being able to understand what you're looking at. And the fourth principle is robustness. So it's in regards to the assistive technologies and all the different user agents. So by user agent, we're really just are saying browsers, different ways of displaying the internet. It's important that websites are robust enough and that the content is robust enough that it can work across these different technologies and be interpreted as well. And those are the four principles. You can definitely read more at the w3.org. There's a lot of stuff. It's pages and pages of info. This is very brief. To get into detail would take a lot longer than what I have. But anyone that's interested in building sites that are actually accessible, I would recommend reading WCAG 2.0 very thoroughly. And again, this is mostly for front-end standards. We're not talking about like WordPress core or that. This is really mostly for front stuff.
Are there any rules behind, I mean, we all know the dashboard really well. Are there any rules around compliance for the back end? I know that WordPress Foundation or Automatic has a WordPress compliance team, which is...
Yeah, so there's Make WordPress Accessible,
there you go,
which I'm part of as well. So a lot of that is taking those principles and applying them to the back end. So making the tool itself accessible.
Do you know if my clients will be in violation if the dashboard, for example, if they have a person with a disability managing, all of a sudden can't manage their website because it's not accessible for them? Mm-hmm. Would they be technically in violation of the rules?
I mean, as long as they follow like the principles and the guidelines, right? I mean, you can contribute if you find like the dashboard is lacking in certain accessibility. You can bring it up to the group. They could put in a test, and they can easily fix that kind of stuff. So as long as it falls under web accessibility guidelines, you're pretty much free to.
That was to make.wordpress.org/accessibility. Right?
That's right. Yes, make.wordpress.org/accessibility. Great stuff on there. Great people on there as well. Definitely check it out. If anyone's interested in contributing to WordPress, they want to make it more accessible. That's definitely the group to approach. So moving forward, I did put together a brief list of tools that you can actually use to evaluate your websites. So let's say one of your project requirements in your project scope is to ensure that your website is WCAG 2.0 AA compliant. How are you going to know? These are the tools that will help you. So Essential Accessibility is actually a Toronto-based organization. And what they've done is they've actually built a really cool browser, I guess quote-unquote browser. I wouldn't say it's an official browser, but it works pretty much like a browser. And it's got extended accessibility options in there. So if anyone's really curious about how accessibility tools work from a software standpoint, it's just downloading it. I took a look at it a while back, and it actually opened my eyes to a lot of different options, and considering different options when building sites and when programming them. So definitely check those guys out. They've done a great job. They've got a lot of big companies now on board. So a lot of companies are building their sites specifically to work with this type of browser and to work with their functions. So they've been making a lot of strides in ensuring that their product is being reached by big companies and that their audience is downloading it and using it. It's all free. They've been making great strides in really understanding how the web works and how the web should work. And like I mentioned, if anyone's really interested in finding out the ins and outs of great accessibility functionality, download that software and fire it up.
So is that like, you said it's like a browser, so you can test your WordPress site?
So you can load sites on there, definitely. It works like a browser. You load your sites on there, but it's not going to display the same way as like your Firefox or your Google Chrome. Right? It's
So
going to
would
be a
it
bit
give you
different.
an idea that you're getting things the way that you need to be?
Well, it's not really a testing tool. I wouldn't use it to evaluate your sites. What it will do is it'll give you an idea of what tools are out there, or what people are using as accessibility tools. So when you open the browser, it's just like a giant toolbar of all kinds of different things for different scenarios, for different people, for different challenges. So what it does is it kind of opens your eyes to what what people with challenges are actually using, and how you can develop to assist that, or at least further it by however you build your site. As long as you can kind of fit within those guidelines, you should be good to go. The next tool is actually one of the most popular evaluation tools out there, and that's Wave. I don't know if anyone's ever used that, but it's a great tool. You log onto the site, you punch in your URL, and it's going to, in real time, dump out a report on how accessible your website is from a programming standpoint, as well as your content, which is important. A lot of people, and a lot of the newer trends and plugins and themes that are web accessible friendly don't take into consideration the content that people are inputting into them as well, which also needs to be just as accessible as the actual framework itself. And so Wave does a really good job of telling you what tags you're missing or any errors in your actual code, as well as how to optimize your content. So it's a great tool for finding, and it also tells you which compliancy level you're working with. So you can actually select single A, double A, and triple A compliancy, and it will then generate a report on that on the site homepage, as well as all the inner pages. And you can essentially can take that information, tweak your code, and build more accessible, from a programming standpoint, from a content standpoint, more accessible features and functions. The third one is basically the same thing. It's another evaluation tool. Plug in your URL, it gives you a report on your HTML. It does a little bit better from a coding structure, from a programming structure. It does a bit better than Wave. Wave does a really good job of identifying content accessibility, and HChecker does a fantastic job of identifying HTML accessibility issues. So if you want to write good, accessible code, you plug in your URL, it'll give you a report that you can then take or hand off to a developer, and they can easily implement the fixes from there. Some really great tools. There's a lot of more stuff out there. These are just the three that I chose particularly because I use them and I think they're very valuable. But if you Google web accessibility tools, there's a lot of stuff out there. It's a very robust channel of evaluation tools and just tools to make things more accessible. So it's definitely a lot of stuff there. Moving forward, I presented a couple of WordPress accessibility tools specifically. Now the first quote I got from, I believe, WordPress.org, and it states that WordPress, with a high quality theme, works right out of the box to help keep your site accessible. A great deal of work is done for you, but you still have to take the time and patience to maintain those accessibility standards with creating your content, which is pretty much what I said. WordPress out of the box is making great strides and is doing great work to ensure that the back end and the front end is accessible. And so what it really comes down to is, if you're buying a theme that is accessibility friendly and you're going the extra mile to include these particular plugins to make your websites more accessible, always consider your content, because it's going to come down to that. And the content is just as important as the framework or the structure of the website itself. So always consider content. There are a long list of different WordPress tools that can be used. The most popular one was created by a WP-A11Y, which is the WordPress accessibility team. Joe Dolson, been around for a while, been doing great work with accessibility. Has come up with this plugin. The plugin itself helps correct a variety of common accessibility issues. Obviously, it doesn't it doesn't address all of them because it doesn't consider content. So what this particular plugin is it makes your framework and your themes more accessible. But then, when it comes to content, you definitely have to maintain and make that accessible. Outside of that, another web accessibility tool or WordPress accessibility tool created by a company called Web Dorado, and it's a zoom tool. So you can, I don't know if anyone, whether you're Mac or Windows, there's a function that you can use on your OS that allows you to zoom in. It gives you that bar across the top that's like a magnifying glass and allows you to zoom in different areas so that people with visual impairments can see them. This particular tool kind of does the same, where you can zoom into different parts. It's really easy to use. You're not having to zoom in the entire website that you can do with your browser. That causes a lot of extra scrolling, and it's just a real pain. This does a nice clean job of allowing you to zoom into specific sections. I thought it was a really great tool. It appeals to those with visual impairments, elderly individuals. It just works well overall. You find a lot more great tools at the WordPress accessibility group / useful tools. They've got a lot of stuff mentioned there: WordPress plugins, evaluation tools, other great tools for content, video, you name it. They've done a great job of listing resources to help you build more accessible websites in general. So that basically covers my presentation in a nutshell. Like I said, I didn't go into too much coding because it's a lot of stuff to cover. This gives you the basics to kind of go home, do a little bit more research, find out how you can make your sites more accessible, take it to the next level, and contribute to the web. That's what, especially the people in the WordPress community get the sense that contribution is always a big part. So get involved. Go to the WordPress accessibility group page. Look at what's going on. Look at what's being done. And if anyone out there is interested in getting involved, or if anyone out there wants to test certain things for WordPress core for other sites, definitely find me. I'm going to be around all day. I'm doing a lot of great work in terms of accessibility. And if there's anything anyone wants to know, they can definitely find me. Again, you can find all of our stuff at thegenius.ca. If there's any questions, I'm sure this topic is a bit tricky. Some people find it difficult to understand the concept. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Sure.
Among all those testing tools, is there one that the regulator use to test your site? Do you decide if you have your site password or not?
So like I mentioned, we do use Wave. Wave is a free tool. We do use that only because it actually, what we really like is the fact that you can distinguish between compliancy levels. So you can you type in your URL, on a drop-down menu, you can set which compliancy you're looking to reach, and then it'll generate a report on that. So if you're really shooting for AAA compliancy, you can set that up. You run your website through the software, well, it's online. It's an online-based tool. So you run it through, and it'll give you a report on all the elements. It's really cool. I can actually show you right now if you'd like, real quick. It's a really cool tool. Let's see if I got time. Yeah, I got time. Data accessibility tool. Right, pursue. Pretty basic homepage, just asks you for your URL. Let's see. Let's just do Starbucks. I was curious to see. Up and in, you hit enter, and you're going to see. So on the right side is all of your. On the right side is all of the notifications and all the reporting, and on the left side you actually see your site, the site itself. And what it does is it actually points out all of the different areas that correspond with the right side. that are problematic. So it tells you, you know, right now it ran through 5 errors, 14 alerts, and so on and so forth. HTML5 and ARIA, which is pretty common stuff right now. So it's a really good tool. Like I was mentioning, you can go through no styles, contrast, stuff like that. So you're filtering, again, it allows you to filter between the different compliances. So you can take your site and filter it in different ways, go through the levels. Full, obviously, being AAA, AA, single A. Section 508, I'm not 100% sure of, but I'm sure there's significance there, obviously.
It's the US standard.
Oh, okay, US standard, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, so it's a really great tool. We use it all the time. I mean, obviously, in situations where accessibility is one of our requirements, or part of the project scope, we use this quite a bit. It's not only good for WordPress sites, but any site you learn. Pop in a WordPress site, it's going to give you the exact same report. Is anyone brave enough to give you their site? Who, you? What's
This is a client we just launched.
okay, client site.
Yeah.
I want to put up your own site.
Well, actually, because we are concerned about making it accessible as possible, so.
Perfect.
Okay, so it's indigenous, and then walks.
See, now you're making me foolish.
GENOUS, walks.com.
Walks like that?
Yeah, .com. And it was using a WordPress theme.
WordPress theme, okay.
Because just to keep it accessible to price for my clients, I use a theme, we use that structure, and then we go from there. But yeah, I'm curious to see how they
6
fare.
errors, 5 alerts. Not bad, actually.
Okay.
Not bad.
Okay. And the alerts meaning what?
So you can get into them pretty in depth, right? So alerts, no heading structure, broken
Yeah.
same page link. It's going to tell you everything in detail when you hit the this little flag
Yeah,
over here.
so, but it is a home page, so yeah, there isn't really an opportunity to do a header. Okay, so,
I mean, you'll have to take the report, you know.
yeah.
It's going to be difficult to implement all fixes. I could be the first to tell you. You know, some of them you're just going to say, either I change it or I don't. Some things you're going to have to actually change on the site itself, like duplicate. So you know how like when you're showing like your recent blog post, your title's a link and at the bottom read more is a link. Technically that's not accessible because you've got a duplicate link in very close proximity. So what we've done is we've eliminated all of our blog titles from having links. So only the read more, and read more is now read more blog title because that's actually more accessible when it comes down to screen readers and stuff. So there's some things you got to change fundamentally with the way your WordPress blogs work just to make it more accessible.
Biggest pushback we're getting from our clients, like we deal with like larger media organizations, and the biggest pushback we're getting is, we really want to be accessible, and now they don't have a choice, but no, they really want to be accessible, but they're like, well, but we don't want to lose engagement. We're like, you know, we spent so long fine-tuning everything, so that brings up, you know, you started moving titles around and killing links. If I tell a client that they have to now, you know, take one of the duplicate links off, take a link off a site, and they go, what are you talking about? We get 30% of our engagement comes from there. How do you deal with that? Do you have metrics around that?
It's kind of tricky, and like I was mentioning, even like aesthetics, some things you're just going to have to aesthetically change because it's not accessible. And so like I said, some of it's pretty difficult. I mean, it really comes down to, you know, either it's going to engage the way they want it to, or it's going to be fully accessible. Unfortunately, there's no way of saying that, you know, you can. I mean, I'm sure there are ways, people are creative about it to cater to
You know what I mean?
that
There's
kind
no
of
numbers around what works best. You haven't seen anything.
stuff. Statistically wise, not specifically. We kind of just approach it, you know, as a per project or per challenge basis. You know, we run our tests and hope for the best. Yeah, guys.
So my question is around JavaScript. I mean, it used to be, and this may still be the case, that your site basically had to be able to work with no JavaScript because the screen readers couldn't execute it. Is that still the case, or is it starting to?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the case still. I mean, you know, in terms of like anything that's like animating or anything, it's generally not going to be too accessible. There's going to be a lot of limitations. Like I said, even like WCAG 2.0 AAA compliancy is basically like websites that were built in like the early 90s. Just like HTML, no style, just function. It works, it does the job. People that have assistive technologies can use them, but they're not pretty and they're not engaging. They're just sources of information. So it's a balance.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right now, I can't specifically say that there's one way of getting it all right. You kind of just have to, at the end of the day, you're going to have to compromise. And that's kind of just the nature of it. Sorry, I'm going to take that one in the back and then I'll get to you. Go ahead.
You could have three options, you know, you could have the AA, AAA option for a viewer to.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely build the same site 3 different ways. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, you know, one way of approaching it. If you can't achieve everything in one site, that is definitely a good point. And I know of other companies that have done that, especially with the AAA compliancy. Usually you can get single A and double A to work with your regular websites. AAA will almost always require a separate site. And like I said, it's just dummied down, bare bones, it works, it gets you the information, and it's accessible. Sure, but
Another way to think of it is, remember how much energy people spend trying to get mobile to work.
it's the same idea.
Substitute mobile and accessibility, and a lot of times when you improve your accessibility, you make the mobile experience better at the same time.
True. Yeah, definitely. Even combining the two, so mobile
Yeah.
and accessibility. That's
Also, it doesn't have to look 1995, that's why we have CSS and all
right.
these things.
I mean, yeah, that was that was an exaggeration, obviously. But my
Right.
point was that for AAA compliancy, you really need to compromise a lot of aesthetics.
Or make it work when it looks
to
like
make it. Yeah, sure.
So I work client side, and a lot of the times clients don't understand or appreciate accessibility, and even when they're mandated, they're like, we don't know, type thing. So one of the cells that I always use is how it's often accessibility best practices or SEO best practices. Because a Google crawl is essentially going through a site similar to the way that a screen reader would. So my question is as Google's trying to get smarter and understand web pages the way that humans should, do you think that accessibility best practices and SEO best practices are going to effectively converge?
Well, they will, and because a lot of what it takes to make your content accessible is really just adding like alt tags and stuff like that, and just making your content or building your content in such a way that if somebody has a screen reader, it's going to tell you this is an image, this is the tag for that image. Now somebody can understand that it's an image and kind of get an idea of what that image is. So the more information that you attach to specific elements of your content should inevitably rank pretty well. In terms of the Google crawl, it's going to do well, right? Because it's got more information to use. Your site has more tags. Everything is kind of wrapped up nicely, so that I wouldn't be able to say that they work hand in hand, but I could see how one would inevitably improve the other. So I think that's a good point to raise as well. But yeah, I mean that would have to do some like testing to see like how well non-accessible site is versus an accessible site. I mean, inevitably you'd have to build the exact same site, one accessible and one not, to see how well they rank. It would be an interesting test. It's something that I definitely would look into. But that's logically it would suggest that it should kind of help your SEO in general. But it's really just about making things. It's really just about communication, right? Accessibility is just about communication. How can I communicate something that, for the general masses, is acceptable to somebody that has a challenge? Like, how can we communicate that same idea or that same brand or that same product? That's really what it comes down to. I think I'm getting the axe. Okay. Any other questions? Anyone else want to shoot up their site? You in the back.
I just wanted to add, really cool tool you can install on Firefox is a toolbar that you get from Wave that allows you to test your accessibility locally.
Yes, they do. There is the Wave toolbar that when you do the Google search, it comes up. Little Firefox. Now I wish they'd come on with the Chrome version because I don't know. Firefox is good too. I'm not bashing
You
it.
test your sites on Firefox anyway.
Well, you have to inevitably, yes, to cross-browser test them. But yes, sir.
How well do tools like readability, the plugins you can get from various browsers, that basically strip out all the excess? How well do those work in improving accessibility?
Sorry, readability, is that a specific plugin?
Yeah, Jordan, readability is an app that what it does is you like say you're reading a blog post, you can save that into a queue somewhere else and it just brings up a very simplified version of it, like just text only.
Okay.
strips out ads.
Yeah.
and distractions.
Okay.
Like Pocket, you ever use Pocket? Same deal.
Right. Okay. I'm not too familiar with that particular tool, but like, if it's basically stripping it down, I mean, inevitably, that's probably more for you know, how people can understand content and stuff like that. From a technical standpoint, I wouldn't be able to comment on it, but stripping away all that extra stuff for somebody that, let's say, has a cognitive or intellectual challenges, at least it makes it concise. You know, when somebody's looking at it, they understand this is what it is, this is the information, and they can understand, they can perceive it and understand it how they want to. So, you know, making sure that your content is clear and clean is also very important. Not only should it be able to operate with different assistive technologies, but it should also, you know, people with any whatever range of intellect should also be able to go on there and understand exactly what they're reading, exactly what they're looking at. So the importance of it and the way it works is you've got a lot of different tiers, and again, you've got to consider the different challenges that people face, and you know, try to adjust them as best as you can. Like there's no, you know, in a lot of the work that we've done, we haven't found the perfect formula. Everyone wants to be like, yes, we can do the same 10 steps across all our sites, they're going to be accessible, and it's really just not the case because of the nature of different types of layouts, different types of, you know, branding, color schemes, stuff like that, different types of content. There's really no one formula, but with evaluation tools and with the other tools available, you can at least, you know, step in the right direction of making your sites at least more accessible in the long run. Any other questions out there? Sure.
Sorry, just one more comment, because I used to work for a company here in Ottawa that a lot of their work was accessibility.
Okay.
And people would always ask questions about, it's like, well, what percentage of the population is blind? What percentage of the population is low vision? And if it's something that you're getting feedback from with the clients, there is a substantial amount of that, but a lot of these practices also help with things that could be considered learning disabilities or dyslexia, which actually affects a really large portion of the population, close to that 15%.
That's, so that would fall under like the intellectual cognitive challenges, right? So
But it's the same solutions as the visibility issue, which is interesting.
yeah, they do, you know, they do, I guess, cross-solve a lot of problems, stuff that you can use to help for visual impairments, you can use for cognitive, vice versa. A lot of them do kind of help out each other in certain ways. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it comes down to really just the stats, right? The 15%. I mean, that's to me a significant amount of individuals out there that have challenges that, you know, that may depend on the web for communication, or may depend on the web to, you know, for their livelihood. I know that for myself, getting into the web business was a huge advantage for me because I was able to utilize it to make money and to build a business, right? So there may be other people that will rely on the internet to do the same thing, whether it be to keep in touch with other people. Maybe they can't get out of their house for whatever reason. Internet can be a great communication tool to keep people in touch, keep people informed. You know, maybe if people with mobility issues, they find that internet is a great place to work because of the nature of how well it can be adapted to different technologies. And, you know, you can set up a screen reader and you can set up different devices that will allow you to use computers in general, and now take it to the next step of being, you know, the web being accessible, and you know, you've got a potential industry that can be completely friendly to those that have specific challenges. And so that's where it kind of becomes important to my mind. Yes, you in the back.
Wondering about access to things like screen readers and things like that, or would there be a place you could get that kind of testing done?
It's a bit tricky. In Toronto, I've been trying to organize a small group of people that have different challenges in order to do like solid testing, especially with the WordPress accessibility group. A lot of the testing is done using these tools. Now, they do well, but at the end of the day, you know, sitting in front of a person that's using assistive technology is the best type of testing you're ever going to get, right? So right now in Toronto, I'm trying to build a small team of people that have different issues, different challenges, in order to, number one, test the sites that we build, and number two, contribute to WordPress. We also want to do things, you know, some of the initiatives that we're also going to be doing is also involving WordCamps. How to make WordCamp more accessible, how to make WordPress meetups more accessible. So not only making the tool accessible, making the community accessible. And that's kind of the next stage of what we're trying to do with, you know, with WordPress and WordCamps, is really geared so that, you know, anyone of any challenge can come on down and either present or sit in the audience get their point across, learn something, network, and you know, either expand their business or network or whatever the case may be. So we're doing a lot of things right now, and the goal is to really get actual testing and like real life data. So we're making strides, but in the long run, that's kind of where we want to be. I think that's all of me. I guess I got 5 more minutes. Anyone else have any questions?
You were talking about making content accessible, so from a language perspective.
Language?
Yeah, no, sorry, I don't mean like language as like English versus French. I just meant like when you're doing your copywriting. Because I just came from, you know, that, somebody talking about your copywriting, and now you mentioned content, and I know there's the content with the image, and you have your alt tags and that sort of stuff,
Right.
the actual, you know, the content that you're reading.
So for the most part, like straight text is pretty accessible. You know, screen readers read through the text, and it is what it is. For the most part, content does involve images, videos, so closed captioning your videos, or providing transcripts for all your videos. That's considered more accessible, friendly. Anything that's time-based, so you know everyone loves sliders and things that move. Time-based media is also, you know, there's a lot of strides in making time-based media more accessible. Essentially, it just comes down to providing controls, being able to pause, go back, start, stuff like that. It makes it more accessible. So if somebody has, let's say, a cognitive challenge, and they need a little bit more time to, let's say, read or understand your slider, they're not sitting there and every 10 seconds something's going through, they've got more control. So it's really about the communication and the control over the content that makes it more accessible. But overall text is pretty accessible. You can't really go wrong. It's straight. If a website was just text, people would probably say it's the most accessible site. Anyone else? Anything else? Anyone else want to add?
Isn't there something though with the content to the level of readability, like whether it's written at a university level versus a grade 8 level, or you know, that type of?
Yeah, I mean, I see your point. In terms of, I mean, that would be, you know.
Because a lot of that's audience.
It is, yeah, and I don't know if that really falls under accessibility. That may just fall under comprehension or skill, you know, educational. I mean, I don't know where you want to point it, but I mean, that could potentially be a challenge for anyone and everyone, right? No matter who you are or where you come from.
Yeah.
You either read at a specific level or you don't. So that I can see, you know, how, you know, someone may conceive that as accessibility, but not really, in my opinion at least. Others may disagree, but in my opinion, I don't think so. That pretty much covers it all. That's about the time I have. Thank you very much.